Can I just get a few shows of hands? So who here knows what Scrum is? Good, most of you. Who here is actually working on or trying to work on a Scrum project? Who's using some kind of process template in TFS? Who's tried to customize it? And how many have actually tried to do it with 2010? Okay, so a few people less than 2010. So this is going to be a lot about sort of our journey. So for avoidance of conclusion, we're the guys that actually wrote the Scrum for Team system or Conchango Scrum template. We're now EMC Consulting. So if you're using that template, is anyone using that one? How many people are using Scrum for Team system? How many people are using MSF Agile? Okay, so half and half. This is going to be about how we basically revolutionized it to meet kind of our needs on what we're going to do. So for those of you in the audience, I'm going to do the 2-minute Scrum description of how we define Scrum here. And then we're going to talk about what we mean by enterprise Scrum at EMC. We're going to talk about how we do it with Visual Studio 2010. And I'm going to show you the demo of some of the teams, the tools we produce to make it easier to work with enterprise Scrum. We can talk a little bit about enterprise bug modeling, what we've done with the bug modeling in 2010 so that it also integrates with the test and lab manager. And then my colleague, or ex-colleague rather, Stuart Preston is going to come up and talk about the process template anatomy and how we've done some of the extensibility and how you can actually extend the process templates yourself. So to kick off with, what is Scrum? I mean, Scrum is a project delivery framework. It's not about engineering. It's not about sort of marketing. It's a project delivery framework. It's both iterative and incremental. A lot of people basically think it's only incremental. It's iterative and incremental. And it's based around the Agile Manifesto. The key points to remember is that working software is the primary measure of progress. So if you want a tool that actually manages Scrum, it's not about tracking the number of hours you've done. It's about measuring how much software you've built. That's the sort of reporting you want to get back. It's all about harnessing change for competitive advantage. So you want a tool that's going to allow you to support changing your project as you go along, should you absolutely need to. It's all about having multiple inspect and adapt points where you can actually see how your project's going along and tune it, which allows you to harness the change. And it's all about promoting close customer collaboration. So any Scrum tool you're going to use, you want to be able to explain it to your business analysts and your customers. So a lot of you might have seen this. This is the old Conchango Scrum wheel. And this basically just shows you the basic parts of Scrum. You have here is the product backlog, which is work items in Team Foundation Server. These are the things that the business wants you to build for them. You track that through a simple report, which is the burn down, which I think most of you have all seen. Then in the sprint planning meeting, up here, that's where the team decides how much of that they're going to do, and that's where they break it down into coding tasks, and then they track their own work with a burn down. So there's 2 burn downs you need. These are the basic things. And then finally, you have an impediment list, which is owned by the Scrum Master, and that's literally all of the bits and pieces that are getting in road of the team actually making their sprint goal. And then they go through that daily Scrum cycle. Everyone's seen the stand-ups. You build a product increment, and then the team shows the product owner in the sprint review the software they've actually built. Then they have another meeting, which is retrospective, to talk about how they can improve the process, and they go along again in the cycle. We've deliberately put in the update product backlog part of this cycle just to illustrate that you constantly refine your requirements. So that's really Scrum in a nutshell. So this has been around for a good number of years, and it's designed for small teams. If you read all the original literature, you have a look at where it really works, it's 7 plus or minus 2 people per team. It's about having a single product owner, which is one of the more kind of controversial points when you get into most organizations, and it scales really easily up to about 3 teams. You won't have any problems, get 3 kind of Scrum teams going together. So you can manage that with pretty much any process template. You can either put one together yourself, you can use MSF Agile, or you can use Scrum for Team system. So our TFS template is probably the most widely used template in the market. Before we left, there's about 40,000 downloads on that, which is a lot for a process template. But it's a fairly simplistic sort of system. So when we're talking about enterprise Scrum, the irony is that you actually get more variation than you do with single team Scrum. And the reason for this is that you're going to more brownfield environments. You're going into situations where you've already got pre-existing departments. You're going to situations where you've got different code bases, different structures, offshoring, you've got acquisition, all that sort of stuff like that. But on the other hand, you've got the enterprise need to have consistency in tooling. So when you're talking about enterprise Scrum tooling, you need to balance this consistency and this adaptability. I need to be able to adapt my process template to fit what we're doing, but I also need it to be fairly consistently so the surface delivery guys, the IS guys, can actually maintain all the back-end systems. And we did what a lot of you guys did. We took our template and then we customized it to meet each of our clients' needs. We actually got it up and running one group of people with about 24 Scrum teams at the same time. But then it was very, very difficult to move that between projects. So the solution we came up with 3.0 is we went all the way back to the drawing board and we decided what we need to be able to do is support varied project configurations while minimizing our template modifications. Basically, template modification had to be seen as a kind of a last resort. You want to be able to do a lot of different things and not have all your reports break, because that's the most frustrating thing, isn't it? You make a few little changes in the XML, all of a sudden all the reports break. It's a real pain in the ass. So a couple of indicators you might be heading into the enterprise Scrum space, and these aren't by any means definitive, but if you've got more than 30 developers on a single project, you're starting to head away from it because you've got 3 very large teams for Scrum teams. If you've got multiple product owners, if you've got multiple streams of work or business units, or you're integrating third-party work, that's when you're starting to get into the enterprise Scrum arena. You're starting to get to the point where the books are failing you. There's nothing in there that tells you how to do this stuff. Or if you've got interwoven cadences for whatever reason, you've got a bunch of guys that are working on the UI bits and they can work for two weeks, but you've got a bunch of sort of back-end BI developers that need to work in monthly cycles. Again, most of the tools kind of fall down at this point. So what did we do to support Enterprise Scrum? We wholly embraced acceptance test-driven development, which I'm going to talk about. We made the template capable of supporting hundreds of teams, absolutely hundreds of teams, and dynamically adjustable. You don't have to say, these are all my teams. You can roll teams on and off on a per sprint basis. They can all work in different cadences. They can start in different days or different time zones. Anything you can possibly imagine, it supports right out of the box. Except it doesn't come in a box. It allows flexible bug modeling, which allows you to work very, very strict agile for a kind of a greenfield sort of approach, or it allows you to basically hold all your bugs if you've got a situation where you're walking into a project with a lot of technical debt and the whole traditional Scrum approach is really, really going to cause you a hell of a lot of pain. And it integrates with Test and Lab Manager, so that all those no repro bugs, all of those test runners and stuff like that will all work linked in seamlessly with the template. So it really is a great ALM solution. You can have everything you need for a large-scale project all in this one thing. You knock up a nice little SharePoint portal and the managers can see what's going across multiple countries. So before I get onto the demo bit, one of the things we've changed the way I installed it is literally it's a 4-point install now, which is install just drops the bits. Deploy pushes the template out into the team project collection. So you might have a bunch of different team project collections. We now just list them up and allow you to basically install and retract the template from those things, and it makes upgrading easy as well. We have an event service that supports a lot of the template, which Stu will be showing a lot about, and it helps make sure that is registered and unregistered out of the system. So it's really easy to maintain it. You then, with new project creation widget, create an empty project and then use the configuration tool, which I'll demo in just a moment, to actually set up your team environment. So I thought about showing you how to install the template and decided that'd be really boring. So for those of you who used it, this is our new deployment tool, which is literally, it just connects to a TFS, shows you the existing team project collections, and allows you to deploy or retract, subscribe or unsubscribe the event services. It's just simple, it's easy, and it comes free with the download. So, for those of you using TFS 2008, who's linking things together? Who's linking the wits? Not many of you actually, because it's not particularly valuable, is it? You can link them, but it's a flat structure, and it's a very implicit relationship, and it doesn't really mean anything. So, in 2010. They do mean things. You can have a very expressive kind of template. So this is an example of what we've done with a product backlog item. So the product backlog item is just Scrum terms for kind of, it's not quite right, but it's my requirement. It's the problem I need to solve. So this is what we've got. All of the blue things are work item types or widths. And you have the product backlog item, which is implemented by one or more sprint backlog tasks. You then test it by one or more acceptance tests, and it can be impeded by one or more impediments. So it puts it fully in a Scrum context, and you can see this absolutely in Team Explorer. They're bidirectional, which means that sprint backlog tasks implement product backlog items, which means if you've got a developer working on his work and he suddenly loses sight of the forest, and he goes, why am I doing this? I've forgotten why I do this. You go straight to Team Explorer and you go, bang, I can cite my way up to what I'm actually doing. Same with the testers. The testers, if you've got offshore testers, they can go, what's the context of this test? And importantly for the Scrum Masters, when they do triage on the impediments, they can actually see which of the pieces of functionality are being impeded by different impediments you might have in your Scrum project. And again, Stu will show you how we've implemented these. So these are custom link types. 2010 comes with a lot of kind of parent-child type of things. We've actually created our own because we wanted to use the specific language of Scrum. So if you use our interface, if you download this template, our beta 2 of this, and use our interface, you'll see specific tabs. If you just use the kind of right-click, make sure you use the right link type, because 2010 will just sit there and allow you to do anything, and it'll actually sit there and just do parent-childs and links and that, and then you're back to 2008. So make sure that if you are going to use it and you get a product backlog item, they're implemented by or use our user interface. So why is that a good thing, apart from making some nice slides? Acceptance test-driven development is a good example. So you can see in Team Explorer here, we've got the product backlog item up the top here, which is, if you can read it, it's cancel a reservation. And then directly connected to it, because this is a tree query in WCL, or the work item query language, you can see that all the acceptance tests are directly linked to it. So this is the sort of thing that your business owners can actually relate to. Before, they would actually look at sprint tasks, and sprint tasks are meant to be understood by developers. That's the whole point. And you get people turning themselves into circles trying to make sprint tasks that were readable by the business, and then they didn't serve the developers anymore, and you have this whole status problem. Business owners can really understand these acceptance tests, and they can see the progress mid-sprint to line up with their burn downs about what tests are actually going and the meaning. So you're playing your planning poker, you come up with your acceptance tests, you can put them right there in Team Explorer, and you can track how they're going. So link types makes it great to support acceptance test development. The other thing you can do is that ready is an important concept in Scrum. The concept of bringing in requirements that are well-formed, that have acceptance tests, that are well understood by the whole team. How many guys of you that are working on Scrum teams have ever come in and you get a requirement that goes, oh, it should be fast? You know? It happens, doesn't it? Somehow business owners look at Agile and they look at Scrum and going, I don't have to make any decisions. I'm just going to put vague rubbish down on index cards and you're magically going to know what I want. And played around with this a lot, and we sort of, started putting ready states in PBIs, and guess what we found? If you're the sort of person that gives your development team rubbish and expects them to read your mind, you're exactly the sort of person that's going to tick that ready state on that backlog item. It's not going to stop you. So what we did instead was we came up with a WCL query, which is items that are ready for planning. And rather than allowing the users, the business owners, to put them in there, it actually checks for, has this story been sized? Are there meaningful acceptance tests linked to it? And you can infer ready from it. So there's just no way out of doing it. And you set up a very simple rule which says, when we do sprint planning, we don't go to your master backlog, we go to the ready backlog. And it's a great strength of 2010 that you can actually sit there and go, yeah, we're going to look at this stuff. We're actually not going to take stuff. I mean, it's obviously not a guarantee, but it gets you a lot further. It means that you have to have actually planned, sensible work, and it helps you manage the pre-sprint planning workflow of getting stuff into that backlog. So that's one of the great things you can do with the named link types. So, on to multi-team support. Planning scope is what we're calling our combination of iteration paths and the work item types that support them. So it builds on the iteration path that we've got. It also allows for the complex multi-team projects, and we use our event service, which we'll show you a bit more later, to collect some metrics in real time to support meaningful release planning. So this scary thing is the structure of our iteration path in 3.0. It basically says, so this is the top of your team project collection up here with the project. Projects are made up of one or more releases that are then built by one or more work streams, and the work streams are then built by one or more sprints, and the sprints ultimately do by one or more teams. And we lay the work item types, and again using the named links, over there's a release work item type, a sprint work item type, and a team work item type. And these are used to store some extra information that you might want to keep. So you keep information about the capacity down the team. The sprint work item type is what we call a roll-up thing. It actually just rolls up all the summaries from the teams, and the release item is used for release planning. So that looks pretty complicated, but it can really easily handle either of these two scenarios. So at the top, you've got a 3-month release, and you've got 4 teams. These guys are working on 1-month sprints. These guys are working on 2-week sprints. And these guys are working on 3-week sprints. And that all just can be seamlessly modeled. These guys down here are all working on 2-week sprints, but they start on successive days. And so again, rolling this up into the sprint object, you can actually manage this as one sprint, even though they all start on a different day. I didn't draw it, but you could easily insert something like that into that. Now, the important part about that is that all the standard reports just support. You can throw anything you want into there, and the reports will just automatically adapt to it. So this is just a simple example of a sprint burn down. And this one just shows 2 teams individually burning down with individual capacities there, and then you've still got the aggregate view over the top. So if you remember the older version, it just shows you the aggregate of all the teams. You can filter by each of the teams. You can filter by work streams if you've got things broken up into different work streams, but it handles all the multiple teams. As an example of teams that are starting on different days, you can see how that you've got the 2 burn downs. It shows you down here that they're starting on different days, and this shows you the aggregate of the work that's remaining for this sprint, including this kind of sailfish-looking thing where the second team actually starts coming onto the project. Looks a bit odd, but that's actually what's happening, and the whole point of Scrum is to show you actually what's happening, which is suddenly this is all the work we've got. So that, a lot of you are probably sitting there going, damn, process templates were fiddly enough. And it's just like, I'm not going 10 feet of this thing. So the problem is that these projects are complicated. They really are. You know, if you've got 4 teams in Moldova and 1 in Romania and 1 in China and 1 in LA, it is complicated. So rather than go the approach we had before, which was give you a kind of a template and you can fill it in, we start our new projects completely blank, and we give away a free tool that allows you to set it up any way you want. So this is the Scrum Master's Workbench, and there are 2 basic modes for it. So this is a WPF application that connects to your Team Foundation server, and this runs after you've created the new project wizard. So if you've got a single team project, you can just go to the quick setup. All you have to do is add a project start date, a project end date. It defaults to 3 months. Give your team a name, and we'll call it PDC 09. Give them a capacity. Let's say they work 240 hours a week, and then give them a sprint length. It defaults to 14 days or 2 weeks, and that's pretty good. So I click on apply. It gives me a warning, say it's about to blow away all my iteration paths, thinks for a bit, and then it visualizes the structure. And so in about 5 seconds, if we want, we can then just write that back to TFS. I think that's a lot easier than it was before. Dead easy. So you get exactly what you actually want to begin with. If you've got a more complicated project, just click on Advanced Setup, and you can have multiple releases. So let's do a 9-month project with 3 releases. You can obviously change these. You can change the project start dates. And so we're going to run 2 releases internally, then 1 production release. And we might run with 2 work streams. So we might have, say, a front-end team, or let's call them Silverlight. Seems to be these are Silverlight developers. And then we're going to have our back-end team over here. So we can name all of these work streams. We might have different product owners for these guys. And the back-end team is actually going to work to 4-week cadence. So we're going to have a 2-week cadence and a 4-week cadence. And then we're going to assign some teams. So we might have the Condors, badges, and then the Raptors, and then the Vipers. So these 3 front-end guys are all going to work on the front end. We're going to have 1 back-end team, and so they're going to have, say, double the capacity because we've got all exactly the same teams. So we've managed to plan for a 4-team project running in 2 different work streams, running across 3 releases. So we'll click on that, get the warning dialog that we're about to blow away, thinks for a bit, and now we've actually visualized that entire project again. So then we can actually start to go in, and I'll just zoom into here. and you can actually see that we've got 6 sprints planned for the front-end team and 3 sprints planned for the back-end team. And you've got that in both releases. So in this release, in release 01, this is the extra information I was talking about. So you can put in your release audience. So this one, we can sit there and go, right, it's going to be internal. So when everyone's looking at your project, they're going to go, people get really associated with the whole release thing. They go, oh, we're not ready for release. It's not actually releasing. No, it's an internal release. It's a cadence. We can then estimate our capacity and say story points, so we can do 280. I can't enter anything into these next 2 fields because these are going to be filled in by our event service. The planned work will actually roll up all of the backlog items you actually add to that release. So when you put them in the planning scope for that release, it will suddenly tell you how much you've gone against it. So again, the teams can actually sit in there going, we've got 280 story points of capacity, and then when you add the points to it, you can clearly see in the template that you've planned too much work. The burn work is especially exciting because that actually shows you how much you've done. So when we go and plan release 2, and the teams are all the same, say, and we say, right, we planned for 280, we planned 300 and we actually burned 120. So the next release, we're going to do 400 points. And you've got some nice solid information to reference back that maybe that's not such a good idea. So we'll put that one down and then we'll skip to the last release. And this is another nice feature we've added in, which is we go to release 3 and we'll say that this is going to be go live. What you can also do is on a go live, this is when the work starts and work ends. You can actually put in a go live date, which takes into account the whole deployment stuff. So you've reflected again, you've got the whole project in there that we all know that it's actually not going to go live until, say, Christmas. And that's all stored in the template. So that's the new project configuration wizard. And again, that's coming as a free download to support the template. Oops, wrong remote. So let's quickly talk about bugs. So this is how it actually works in process in terms of what our template does. So our friend, the product backlog item, is there. We use our named links to, clicker stopped working, been a long week, add these tested by acceptance tests. So this one up here is green because it's run and it's passed. This one here is grey because it's not implemented. We track to see whether anyone's actually even tried to implement the test. So the developers will, all of the acceptance tests will start up as not implemented. When a developer thinks that they've actually implemented enough code for that acceptance test to pass, they set the flag for ready for test, and then the QA people can then pick it up, or another developer can go pick it up. So in this case, however, somebody's running some exploratory testing, and they file a bug against that acceptance test. What happens is the event service automatically fails that acceptance test. You don't have to do anything. If somebody raises a bug against one of your acceptance tests, it automatically fails. So, and then we run the second acceptance test, and that one's all great. To get the product backlog item to done, you have to fix that bug, and then as soon as that bug's fixed, that one automatically goes to passed because it's actually been run again, and we've run the test again. They're both passed. Now all acceptance passed. Again, the product backlog item automatically goes to passed. So that's basically the support for acceptance test development. We've left out the bit about the sprint backlog tasks. You clearly actually have to finish all your sprint backlog tasks and do your acceptance tests. I have to point out the acceptance tests are optional. If you're not at the situation where you don't want to use acceptance test-driven development, we don't force you to use it. But it's there if you want to use it, and it's got a lot of lifting support in terms of the event service, and it's not a hassle to use because it will manage all the states and roll those up for you. So after you've gotten to that done state, the whole point in Scrum is that the product owner actually decides bugs that people find in. QA might find them, customers might find them, and people find this really kind of iffy, especially if there's lots of small bugs. You know, there's a whole bunch of cosmetic bugs, and you don't really want to bother your product owners, and the product owners can't make decisions. So problem is, though, is a lot of times developers can't actually normally fix sort of feature level bugs because they don't know what it's supposed to do. So, you know, a good example of something I was talking before is that, you know, I used to click on the IE button in my quick start bar and I get a new Explorer window every time. Now I do it, it just shows me the ones I've got. Is that a bug? No, it's just how Windows 7 works. And so that's why it's kind of dangerous for people to just fix bugs. So to make it work a little bit better, is you can bring up these bug reports. So you can create as many of these bug reports as you like, and you can do with them whatever you want. So if you just want to track bugs, we can do that. They have the no repro steps in it. You can organize them into area paths and iteration paths and do whatever you want with it. On the other hand, if you want to do the ATDD thing, you can treat it like this. So you can treat it as a description of instance of negative application behavior. And the product owner can go in there and have a look at all of these and go, right, do I care about these bugs? If I do, then I'm going to connect it to acceptance test. And you can bundle these up. If you get multiple bugs which all point to the same thing, you can all point them to an acceptance test. Either a BA can do this, or a technical, or a tester. You can write yourself a new acceptance test. And again, it's just like good unit testing. I find a bug, what should I do? The first thing I should do is write a failing test. This is the same thing. I've got a feature problem, what should I do? I should document in my ALM system what it's supposed to be doing, so I've got a record of what it's supposed to be doing. Then I link these together. Then the next decision I have to make is, when do I want this fixed? And that's when you actually link up the acceptance test to product backlog items. So this is terrific for standard stuff, cosmetic stuff, and you can bundle all of them into these kind of bug fixing sprints you get. But this allows the product owners to actually schedule this bit and more technical people to structure this stuff. And so that becomes your container for scheduling and value to the business. So where this eventually leads us to is that you get an incremental regression test suite for your Agile project. Because if you've been doing the ATD development, you end up with a bunch of acceptance tests that you can make sure you haven't broken any previously created functionality. So if you start off with PBI number 1, you get all these acceptance tests. So what happens, so we get to this done stage. So we haven't done anything, we're building it, we've done it. If we're doing this incremental regression test and one of our tests fails, the system sets the PBI to broken. And that means that you built it at one point, it got signed off at one point, but now it's no longer functioning. And then you can zoom in on this and you can track the cycle times on how many PBIs break. You can look for hotspots in your code and all those sort of stuff like that. But the important bit is that you can then have a call to action to fix this previously created functionality. So when you deliver 9 months worth of work, you know that actually all of those bits that you did back in sprint 1 are still working, because every single sprint you've been doing that sort of stuff. So we talked about incremental and iterative. This is where a lot of these systems fall down, because they don't realize that maybe this PBI is not broken. Maybe the fact is we actually changed our feature. We don't want it to do that anymore. So this is why the product owner should be involved, because the business can look at it and go, that's not broken, I just don't want it. So then they can actually set the thing to deprecate it. And what this means is that at any given time in your project, you have a completely accurate list in your Team Foundation server of what the product does and how you prove it. All of those done PBIs are what it actually does. It becomes a release notes, it becomes specs. All those linked acceptance tests that are passing prove that it actually does it. So you end up with this great detailed specification when it's the most accurate, which is just after you've done it. And this is tremendously valuable to a lot of enterprises, because they sit there and go, finally, I've got the big document I wanted, which describes the software I've got. I just had to wait a little bit longer, but we know it's actually accurate at this point. So in summary to this section, we feel we've built a really enterprise Scrum solution. I've only managed to touch on a little bit of it here, because we've only got an hour, but it meets the needs of sort of like the customers that we deal with at EMC. It handles multiple product owners, multiple work streams. It supports vast numbers of teams over the tree structures. It supports the ATDD, it supports regression testing, and it has this always accurate historical backlog. So with that, I'll hand over to Mr. Preston, who will show you how we built some of it.
Thanks, Simon. Hello, everyone. Stuart Preston, worked for EMC for about 10 years, worked on a Scrum for Team system project for about 4 of those, recently become independent myself. Been invited along today to kind of show you a couple of innards of the template and how it's been built. So we'll go through that. Let's go. It does work. Right. So a couple of items we've had to prioritize because of time. Just going to go through the process template, sort of anatomy, how the link hierarchy has been implemented, and we'll sort of cover a bit on Team Foundation server extensibility. In 2008, those of you customizing process templates in 2008 be familiar with the innards of a process template, which mainly covers 4 areas: work item tracking, version control, reports, and some information about your portal. In 2010, the 4 extra areas have sort of been added, well, three and a bit really. Build area, the build definition now is incorporated in the template, so you must include that. Information about lab management, test management, sort of information about test cases and categories, and hierarchical link types, which I'm sure all of you have sort of heard about, sort of major feature of 2010. We're going to sort of focus more on sort of work item tracking and those link types. So what's actually in the template when we look at work item tracking? We've got a bunch of link types, as Simon sort of neatly described earlier. We have link types such as failed by, impeded by, implemented by. We have a bunch of queries. Those queries can look at those link types. They've been organized into folders for convenience in this version. And we also have the type definitions themselves. These type definitions include information on the fields that actually go on the form that you see in Team Explorer, and the actual tabs themselves that show you the link between different work items. So let's look at one of those, implemented by link type. Simon showed earlier, the product backlog item is implemented by a sprint backlog task. Obviously, that's bidirectional as well, so that implements a product backlog item. I've put the XML up there from the link types, kind of not very interesting. The topology is tree. Tree kind of implements a parent-child type relationship. You can have a directed sort of a network that allows for a relationship between link types. You can then come on, go forward. But the link type itself doesn't tell you what's at either end of the link. So up here, it could be anything. It could be a Team Foundation server will let you link an acceptance test to an impediment, but that's probably not the desired behavior. Let's go. Try that. So when we look at the form that we've used, we've simplified in some ways the product backlog item into the tabs that you can see there. We have an implemented by tab, we have a tested by tab, and they both show the work item type specific to the link. So we have a product backlog item there. If I just go back a second, implemented by, we can see the sprint backlog tasks that implement that product backlog item. So how do we filter specifically those work items so they only show up in the links? Well, here's a sort of fragment of the XML. We see in the tab, we specify how to include the implemented by link in there. We also need to include specifically the work item type we want to see. We also need to exclude all the other link filters, the other link types such as attachments, test cases, and so on. Right, so the other feature we've seen in the template is some read-only fields that have been on the form. Return on investment field we've seen perhaps, and the work remaining, which we've had in there since kind of version 1.2 probably of the template. Who here's actually, who receives an email when their build completes? Yeah? Everyone receives, yeah? Okay, good. So the actual mechanism that Team Foundation Server uses, a built-in sort of notification mechanism. You can actually have not just emails sent out on a notification, but you can actually direct a SOAP message to a web service. The Scrum for Team system actually installs an ASP.NET web service to handle the message that's generated every time you save a work item. And that's installed when you install Scrum for Team system. So if I just switch over to my machine, let's have a look. So here we have our all PBIs and links query. Let's just, if we look at what makes up this query, it's actually a linked query that looks at all the work items of type product backlog item. It has their direct links. We're saying every direct link return every top level work item of every type. So what we've got here is our cancel a reservation product backlog item. We can see all the different link types that are associated to it. We've got 4 acceptance tests here. We've got a sprint backlog task to implement that product backlog item. If I change the business value on this work item, let's say I'm going to change this to 50 and hit save, then behind the scenes, that notification is raised within TFS. It's calling into that web service. And if I refresh this, we'll see the ROI changed, which recalculated the ROI based on that. Just to show that notification mechanism actually working, if I actually fire it up in here to actually implement that from a server perspective, what you need to do is create a web service. You need to define a web service. We've called it work item endpoint here. We have a single web method called notify. Notify handles a string that comes in when we raise the event. Now, one thing that's coming out, hopefully this week, is going to be the alerts editor, and it's going to be part of the Team Foundation server power tools. And I'm told that the team are going to make that very available, hopefully this week. Part of that is an alerts editor. The alerts editor allows us to define all the subscriptions that are going on in the TFS server, or specifically to a team project collection. We can then take our endpoint in that alerts editor. We're going to define a new alert. Just for the purposes of demo, I'm going to say, well, when there's any change in this team project, we're going to send a SOAP message. Here's our endpoint. Let's save that. Now, whenever we save a work item in the system, it's going to raise a message, and it's going to hopefully hit this endpoint. So if I go back to my query here, all PBRs and links, let's change business value back to 100. And then we actually hit this breakpoint on the notify here. The actual message that comes in actually has all the old fields from the old work item and the new fields from the work item that you actually saved. So if you go right to the bottom, it's just you can see here we changed an integer field. It was business value. The old value was 50, the new value was 100. Okay, so that's great. So we can do a whole bunch of kind of clever and interesting things with that. So we use the alerts editor to create a subscription. We set the endpoint to be a web service with a notify web method. But we need to do something with that inbound message. I'm sure all of you who are more creative than me can come up with some great things to do with it. In Scrum for Team System, there's a set of rules that are stored in customizable XML files. You'll see that when you install Scrum for Team System version 3, you'll be directed to where to customize these rules. The default rules cover some common scenarios. I kind of showed you one. Some others in here, we've got set a parent product backlog item state to done when all the acceptance tests pass. That was something Simon covered a bit earlier. We sum the work remaining for product backlog items and based on all the linked sprint backlog items. And the one we demonstrated was just dividing two fields on the same form to calculate a return on investment field. So those rules you can customize yourself. They're kind of proprietary, if you like. And you can even write your own custom processor. A clever developer called Crispin Parker from EMC kind of wrote that engine. His blog's down there. He's actually put a blog up on how to write custom processors for that. I think it's quite powerful. All right.
So in conclusion to the kind of scripted part is that we've created a template which you can take away and easily manage multiple team enterprise projects with Visual Studio. You can extend it to do what you need to do, but the base parts of the iteration path and the event service and how it all holds together has all been done for you. It integrates out of the box with Test and Lab Manager, which is really good for all you who have played with that, because that a lot of people are getting very, very keen on that. A lot of people moving to Visual Studio because of that. So if your template doesn't support it, it's a bit of a downer. And we created this richer experience rather than just a plain XML template by leveraging the notification mechanism to do all sorts of things. Moving around work item types together, summing all sorts of stuff up. We've got work, we've got hours, we've got return on investment in the same thing. So the whole thing is actually calculable as well. If actually the event service breaks, you can actually reset the whole thing and get your project back into a known state. You're not in a situation where you've got a lot of admin to do. We've tried to make sure that the notification services and all the links that work together mean that you can spend less time actually doing your administration. That anything that can be calculated by the computer is calculated by the computer. And showed you how you can customize your link types and a few warnings with that. The link types are a little bit dumb. They don't know what they're actually connecting, and you've got to surface that on the user interface. So if you do change that, put all your control in the user interface, you have to do that extra step on the form. And it comes down to the user-centric design and the Team Explorer elements. We spent a lot of time with the WCL queries thinking about not just what the relationships were, but rather what sort of tasks the Scrum teams do. What do they need to do every day? What QA people need to do? What do product owners need to do? So you can see the orphan bugs, the fact that the bugs are not connected to anything, they're just bugs that have been raised. You can see broken backlog items. You can see all these bits and pieces, and as I referenced before, the whole stuff that's ready. We're just going to work out of the ready bucket and things like that. So we've got some time for some questions. As I said, it's really the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we've done with the template. It's really pretty much a ground-up rewrite from 2.2. So if anyone's got any questions, you put your hand up just slightly early.
Is it going to cost any additional money?
Nope, it's going to be completely free.
Does it have the dashboard as well? No?
In terms of SharePoint portal, at the moment, the beta...
Moving tasks.
We're going to make probably the existing task board work with it as well. We've got another task board that we're going to release that actually works with any template, and it leverages off the work item types. What it does is it actually looks at the hierarchical work items and actually works out what you've done. So in this case, one of the complaints we had about our old task board is if you change the states, the task board just kind of spat out a dummy because it expected the things. We kind of had to do that in 2008 because we had to infer, we had to make decisions about that was a PBI and these were a parent-child relationship. There was no way to model that in the template. The version 3 task board, which is going to be a plugin for that Scrum for team, it's going to be the same application. It will be able to visualize MSF Agile, all this. So there will be a kind of a Scrum board thing coming out for free as well.
That's one of the benefits of the link types, kind of identifying really where you are and what context you have as a work item. Who your parent is.
And it'll be able to visualize even like your sprints to your releases and things like that. So the guy at the front, sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering, as we're working with the process template customization, I was wondering, beyond the MSDN documentation, do you know if there's any other resources to learn about, beyond just like the schema docs, to find out anything about that on the web or?
Very little. And the question was, beyond MSDN, kind of where's the documentation for work item types. There's obviously a schema available. Kind of one thing, if I can just flick to my machine a second, the Power Tool release that's scheduled for this week is going to include the process editor. And that is a really good way to go and discover information about the process template. You can go in, he says.
We didn't have this when we were building version 3. So, I mean, the answer to your question is that we did most of this by trial and error. It's just figuring out what worked, what didn't work.
Yeah. 4 years worth of it in my case.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So in Stu's case, he's been doing this since TFS 2005. I started doing this around 2008. So actually, it's one of the reasons why we point you to Crispin's blog and things. I think actually one of the better resources is our blogs, because we've gone, I've just lost 4 years of my life over this. This is the answer.
Yeah, so we're currently running Scrum system 2.2, and I was wondering if you have any about the upgrade stories of existing users. We've actually added a little bit of customization to our candidates as well, so is that going to be painful?
Depends on the customizations you've made. Yeah. So it's never going to be straightforward, I think. I don't know, Stu's got some reasoned answers to this. And so one of the things we've had to do, and especially since we've become sort of EMC and Conchango, is that we put quite a bit of effort into this. A lot of kind of consultant time. Stu and I went over to Redmond to actually work with the early access of the team so that we could kind of get this out ready for that. And we give this away free. We're giving this away free. We're going to give away the new visualizer free. We're going to give away the new project setup sort of things free. We don't actually make any money out of it. And so the EMC answer is that we're more than happy to help you. And Stu's happy to help you, though. It's really going to happen. To me, the bigger question is not so much moving the work items and stuff around, is that there's some new paradigms in here in terms of the acceptance tests are out there, the bugs work in a different way. So you can definitely do it, and I think there's going to be ways of doing it in an easier way. But it's not like we're going to be releasing a tool which is just going to magically migrate the whole thing. It's going to require some thinking. Is the short answer. It's not impossible, and I'm actually confident there's going to be reasonable ways of doing it, but it's going to require to get the maximum benefit out of it, it's going to require some thinking, and it's otherwise it's going to be a case of doing somewhat the MSF Agile thing, which is the old template just works in the new project, which is a bit disappointing. There's a guy behind you. I will come back to you, but I have answered 2 of your questions there.
In this release, can you do, within Visual Studio that the team explores, can you do drag and drop to prioritize your backlog?
Not really. Well, you sort of can in terms of iteration paths. You got to remember, in the way that the templates sort of force you into these things is you have the sequential numbers. And if you put it into Excel, then you can drag and drop to actually do the numbers. But what's going to always happen is the iteration path is always going to override that priority. So it takes people a little while to get their head around it, but it actually works really well, because if you think about it in Scrum, you have a priority, but then when you go into sprint planning, you don't always necessarily build that priority. And again, because we've got the ready bucket, is that it's a great background for a conversation with the business when they've got a bunch of high priority items that aren't in the ready bucket, and they can sit there and go, well, why aren't you planning these stuff? And going, well, actually, there's nothing in the ready bucket that's in that priority system. So you can drag, the iteration path is always going to override the priority. One of the things we're encouraging people to do with the ROI field is once you actually sort it via ROI and start the conversation there, because you might want to move stuff around and drag and drop in Excel. But again, the business has got to have some pretty good reasons for the fact that they actually want to build something that's got a really, really low ROI when you've got all these other bits and pieces, which is one of the reasons we put it in as a default field. So there's some longer stuff we're wanting to do in terms of story discussions, if you want, we talk about it in the lounge, about supporting things that away from linear backlogs. So again, in enterprise Scrum projects, I didn't really touch on this, but linear backlogs begin to fall down. You need to start working on balanced scorecard backlogs and story maps and things like that. And so the concept of just linear stories, I think, breaks down, I think, for requirements for complicated projects anyway. And we've got some stuff that leverages off the area path that deals with that, but didn't have time to fit it into this presentation.
Can you keep the Scrum project outside Actions? coding projects, or do you need to get it inside? Now, because you're linking bugs and stuff, because today we are working with multiple projects and multiple teams across the globe, geographically, and we found out earlier that it was better to have a separate project where we kind of had all the management in,
Yep.
and then they were kind of linked into
Yes, that's absolutely possible. The question was, can you kind of continue to have linkage of kind of work items to source that's in another project, shall we say?
Yep.
Then yes, you can do that. Certainly within the bounds of a team project collection, you can do that. Whether it won't work beyond the team project collection, it has to be within that.
Yep.
So we have cross teams, cross sprint, interesting. So like SBI for back-end work, the data devs have an SBI. And the API guys have a SBI. Is there any link for the dependencies here so that you can actually plan appropriately?
There's nothing to stop you from doing that. So this is where you can actually use some of the other link types. So we have links that we recommend. The links are there, A, so you can see it and so the tools can visualize it, and B, so the event service knows that these things are related. So that, if you want the SBIs to all roll up into the PBI, you need to link the implements thing. If you want to link together various sprint tasks or even link together PBIs, there's nothing to stop you from doing that. There's nothing to stop you from writing really quite simple WCL queries that actually show those dependencies and things like that. And so that's really quite easy. That's where I'd recommend you use things like the parent-child and some of the standard link types that come in the process template. We wanted to be a little bit less prescriptive with this one, with this template, and allow people to do that if they wanted to. We don't report on it, we don't do anything with it, but it's really easy to actually write WCL queries and stuff that exploits it. We've played with it.
Those in practice become a lot of impediments. If it's not, you can avoid those impediments if you actually have that link in place.
It depends on the project.
You don't commit to work that you can't do because you're.
I would agree with that, and you can actually even use the impeded by link to do that, because if you've got anything that's connected with the impeded by, it won't let you actually start it. So there's different ways of doing that, but not everyone wants to work in that way, so we didn't stick it in. So again, it's a complicated framework, but it's still a framework, and if that works for you guys, then you can actually put that in and link those things together. I said parent-child your PBIs together, or run it down the. I've seen people use the area path as well in different ways, where they actually run the area path down that way, and you can't actually do the PBIs underneath the bits on those bits. So but yeah, you can do it. We don't do anything special or magic in the template. We don't prescribe it, but there's nothing we do to stop you. That was kind of one of because it's not really a product. It's just something we've done that's useful for us, that we're making freely available for other people. We wanted to make sure that we didn't kind of flavor it too heavily. And so if that works for you, we didn't want to put anything that stopped people from doing anything. It's the whole acceptance test thing. If you want to ignore the acceptance test, you can. I don't recommend it though.
When are you guys releasing?
Soonish, probably end of November. We only got Beta 2 about the same time as you guys did. Beta 1 actually broke the event service. The notifications no longer came through, and that was a bit of a drama. No, it was the LCTPs that broke that, didn't they? And so we've actually got it all up and running. We're just sort of polishing off some of the reports and changing the consistency. So it's about to come out real soon now. As I said, we're going to bundle up the tool you saw with it, because the feedback we got from Beta 1 was people just found the whole kind of setting up the iteration path a little bit overwhelming. So we just knocked up a tool that makes it really easy to read and write that. And again, the installation with the deployment tool. So if you want to actually have a separate TPC that you put it in and off, it's make it really easy to install and retract the templates. So that will be coming out probably aiming for about 30th of November, but no later than probably mid-December. I'll give you a card so you can make sure we can hook you up. Any more questions? Yes, at the back.
Did you make any changes with the deferring tasks or as far as descoping things for sprint?
Yes, we made some huge changes, and in fact there was a section in this presentation on. Yeah, I can tell you later. So the new system makes a lot more sense, and again, leverages really heavily on the event service. So it actually, it not only just does the deferring, it does the kind of descoping and rescoping and does it all automatically. So I'm more than happy to tell you how that works out in the lounge. That's it. Everyone's got their flights.
That's on.
Contractually obliged to point out that your feedback is important to the US.